Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Moxtober Daily Recap. It's your guest host, Mark here, and I'm confidant that we'll have a good show tonight. For those of you who don't know, Moxtober is an annual event during the month of October where people do creative work related to Magic the Gathering. People do fan art, custom decks, and other stuff. But here we're focused on custom Magic card designs. Today's prompt is Ashes. And before we hop into it, let me say that the card file for cards discussed today and instructions on how to submit can be found in the description below. With that said, my two guests today are Ancestral of MTG.Design and Bradley Rose of the Beacon of Creation podcast and Milling for 53. Welcome aboard, guys.
Hello.
Hi.
With that said, let's hop into it. I'm going to start with the card, the Hellslayer from the Magic Set Editor file. Let's see if I can pull that up with any sort of speed. All right. So the Hellslayer is a 4/3 haste indestructible for 1, a white, and a red. It attacks each combat if able, and as long as you've whenever it attacks, venture into the Ashmouth, and as long as you've completed a dungeon, the Hellslayer has hexproof and double strike. The Ashmouth is a dungeon that has a lot of drawback rooms to it. It's all drawbacks. You'll be sacrificing lands or getting creatures blown up, discarding cards, things like that. And I just kind of enjoy the idea of an additional dungeon. I enjoy the concept of making something that is just very well statted, but has this like cavalcade of drawbacks that are happening to you as it's happening. I'm not sure that I like the idea of your opponent having agency over, or your opponent having no agency over the drawbacks that are happening, because it seems like you would just collapse down into whatever the easiest drawbacks are. But I like the idea that it can do a lot of stuff that makes you worse off. I do kind of wish that Magma Cavern, one of the rooms in the dungeon, had gave -13/-13 instead of dealing 13 damage, or else removed indestructible when it dealt the damage, just because the idea that the Hellslayer can be the creature that is rolled disincentivizes you from playing other creatures. Where if the Hellslayer can die to it, then you're incentivized to play other creatures, that way they can get blown up instead of the Hellslayer.
I like your suggestion of giving more control to the opponent. If there was a extra line of text that says your opponent chooses which rooms to venture into or move into, that'd be cool. Maybe that can also update the Magma Cavern here in another way. Great point about random means you want to just have just the Hellslayer. If you change it to your opponent chooses a creature, then you're like, okay, so then that would solve that problem. Actually, no, yeah, you're right. You would still want to just play the Hellslayer, but at least the opponent may choose you to move you to the Forsaken Earth and all that. But yeah, oh man, I love that. Like, we know that seeing just 3 dungeons is like, okay, we know we want to see more dungeons, so it's a ripe space to play in. I think doing an exhibition of a dungeon in this way, where it's like it's all bad things, is a great way to demonstrate, oh no, we can still innovate on the dungeon space.
Yeah, we talked about this briefly a couple days ago. Just, boy, wouldn't it be great if there could just be some more dungeons, and then maybe venturing to the dungeon would be even cooler. And I like how the card calls out the dungeon specifically that you have to venture into. Though I guess technically nothing forces you to finish this dungeon. So you could just do any of the other dungeons, like the Tomb of Annihilation, which it is pretty short, or the Lost Mine, or whatever, in order to get the effect on the Hellslayer. I guess I don't know. I feel like the card and the dungeon are a little bit at odds with each other. In other words, the 1/1 devil's, like, I suppose they're chump fodder for the Hellslayer, but it's not going to damage the Hellslayer. Like, with indestructible, it like doesn't really matter if the devil dies. There's no point in dealing the damage to the Hellslayer either. And then also, like, the Fog of Death, I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. That sort of plays into the fire, where it can, all the creatures get -1/-1, and then they have to deal 1 damage. But then, I don't know, it just seems like it's a little bit random that, well, the 1 damage, where's that going? I guess maybe you could take out an extra creature. So I don't know. Maybe there are more knobs to play with the dungeon here.
Yeah.
And maybe I don't know. Maybe the indestructible. Maybe that should be the reward for completing a dungeon.
Yeah, there's this weird thing to like, in my mind, the idea of having a negative dungeon that you're trying to get this creature through for a payoff. The dungeon should probably be like a death trap for the creature, right? You know, where there's like all these different like, if for example, imagine this was like a 3/2 not indestructible, and so you would have like the devil could come in, and then even if you go to the Forsaken Earth, if you end up going to the Fog of Death, then the devil can block the Hellslayer that turn, and the Hellslayer will just die. Even if it's a 3/3, actually, that'll work because you can have the devil block and the Fog of Death happens, and then thing with the devil. The indestructibility here just kind of negates a lot of the drawbacks of the dungeon, which is kind of frustrating because it's like, I don't know, the idea of like navigating a death trap and then having you like come out the other side as this really, really powerful creature is, I think, the appeal of a negative dungeon to me.
I like the idea that, so it's a legendary creature, right? So in a game of Commander, you just recast this Hellslayer, and if you've completed a dungeon, you know, the next time you cast it, it will get that hexproof and double strike. But I really like the idea that if it was, like you say, just this very scary dungeon where there's just more chances the Hellslayer was going to die, it would give it more of a roguelike sort of feel to it, where the Hellslayer dies and then you got to start over, and continue where you left off with the dungeon. So I think that would be actually kind of fun. And I mean, 3 mana is not a whole lot, having to cast that again in the sense of a Commander game. Obviously, a limited. I mean, it's just a 4/3 haste indestructible is just an incredibly good body.
Yeah, there's like this thing where I feel like the effect that I would want this to be trying to style itself after is, those red elementals with trample that stick around for a turn and then they kick the bucket? Like, yeah. I would enjoy if it was something like that, but it was like designed in such a way that if your opponent is playing basically any game plan, it would eventually die. It probably wouldn't survive the dungeon. But you could try and dodge death traps in order to get extra hits out of it. And then surviving the entire dungeon was this like success case that was just like, oh man, you did it. You made it all the way to the top and you slayed Hades and stuff like that. Like the very roguelike experience of everything is trying to kill me. And against all odds, I stopped all of it just by sheer force of will. That seems really, really appealing to me. And there's already like a reasonable rate on stuff like that. And you can price it so that like just the variability of when it might die is an upside as far as things go. It just seems like there's like a slightly better way to do this, even though I think that conceptually, like the idea of the negative dungeon here is really good. One question, do you guys agree that like if you venture into a specific dungeon, you should have to abandon your existing dungeon? Like if you venture into the Ashmouth and you're like 2 steps into Phandelvar, then the Phandelvar progress should just get like yeeted into oblivion?
Oh, that's a good point. That it's a specific dungeon it's mentioning, and you may already be in one. Yeah, it does feel like it means you've teleported away from a non-Ashmouth dungeon if you're in one.
I've always thought that that's how that Wizards should have done it, and maybe they tested that. Perhaps they decided that was, I don't know, restricting or something. But the card could have been rewarded that way. Like, until you complete this dungeon, you can't venture another one. That's an interesting thought.
Yeah, and there's also like maybe this should say as long as you've completed the Ashmouth specifically. I'm not sure there. Anyway, Brad, what's your next card?
All right, let's go to mtg.design. Bedelia, the sun from the ashes. Okay, so we've got here a phoenix with undying and a reward if it did come back with a +1/+1 counter on it, or if you're feeling cheeky, doing some +1/+1 counter play besides using undying. Now, what's cool here, something that like from a personal perspective, is that way back when like M11 came out and they were like, hey, we have Scry in this core set, and then M12, I think that was the Bloodthirst one. So I always thought like, man, I think Undying would be a really good candidate. And the reason why I want Undying to come back is because there's got to be a Phoenix someday with Undying. It's never happened in many years. And but I see it today. And then I was like, yes, there it is. That's because it's perfect for Phoenixes. but I think this one's a good execution of it as well, because you may not be incentivized to block or kill this Phoenix otherwise, because it just comes back anyway, and then it can punish you by letting you do damage to maybe your Dark Confidant.
Do you think this needs
Go ahead.
You go.
So I think this is too easy. I think that you're always going to want to remove that +1/+1 counter on attack. Okay, maybe not always, but if it doesn't have the +1/+1 counter, it can come back. So if your opponent has any kind of way to block this, you're probably going to remove it, and you're just going to get a free 3 damage in. Again, the second time you cast it. So I feel like maybe it's just a little too easy dealing damage. I mean, basically, you can deal 6 once, and then you can deal 2 repeatedly until it dies. I don't know. Maybe
it would be 2 damage if you remove the +1. It shrinks down to 2 and then deals 2.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Okay, so 5 damage. I don't know. I guess I feel like maybe it should cost something a little bit more to bring it back. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with undying creatures to just come back twice. And I'm not saying that, a Phoenix shouldn't just keep coming back, because that's absolutely what they should do. I'm just wondering if it should just have a little bit more of a cost.
One thing that's generally something they strive for with undying creatures is making them kind of suck a little bit defensively. An undying creature that's pretty good at blocking and that also can consistently block when it comes back is pretty threatening. And this thing, while it's not the greatest at blocking, the fact that it can block and then swing in and then shock whatever it blocked or shock face is pretty worrisome, as well as being a very capable infinite blocker with any sort of sack outlet. There's neither a significant time nor a significant mana investment when it comes to just resetting the undying or using the shock or anything like that.
It's a great point for the blocking. It would be nice if it were forced to attack or it couldn't block, or if the reward for removing a counter would be upon dealing combat damage to a player or something like that.
Yeah, combat damage to a player might be ideal, just because then it makes resetting the Phoenix contingent on that. Although getting a 3 power flying blocker that can shrug off lightning bolts and things like that is a bit of an ask for an opponent. But that's not necessarily bad. It can just be a kind of an unblockable threat that's hard to deal with. All right, Ancestral, what's your first card?
Well, yeah, I guess we'll go with an interesting design here. So let's go with an MSE. It's called Chase the Ember-Bird. 1 red sorcery, create 3 feather tokens, and a feather token is either add a red mana or deal 1 damage to any target. It's missing I'm assuming that the token deals the damage, but I think it's an interesting take on today's prompt. Obviously, we're seeing quite a few of these Phoenix-related cards. I guess the interesting choice of it's basically like a treasure token, except you can also instead just deal a damage. It's probably too good. I mean, I guess I'm trying to think of a card that exists in Magic where you can just sack it at any time to deal damage. I'm sure there's some out there. Nothing comes to mind. But I kind of like the idea. Maybe this needs to cost a little bit more, since you can kind of get your mana back. But this could be on if you play this on turn 3 and turn 4, I guess you'd have access to 7 mana, which maybe that's a little broken. But I think I like the idea that this card brings.
The card you're thinking of is Sigil of Fire, I want to say. Is there's just a random enchantment that's got a shock attached to it that you can use at any time. I do think this thing is pretty juiced. The mana mode is already quite good, and having the ability to turn a ritual into just any amount of burn is quite strong. One thing that's notable here is that you can spread out your burn really well. So this is kind of like an arc lightning or something, but an arc lightning where you can turn any of the damage that would be wasted or that you don't want to use into little lotus petals. So you can power out something strong, or just remove 3 1 toughness creatures. And those are all really useful cases, and those are just the extreme cases where the modality of this is also really nice, and the fact that you get to just leave it on the table and you don't have to choose immediately is really, really strong. The combination of those leads me to believe that you probably need to lose one of the feather tokens. Like have this be 2 and a red for 2 feather tokens or something like that. That jumps you some mana, but it doesn't jump you like a huge amount of mana. And it's like basically like a part, the red part of Electrolyze or the mana ramp from that other, is it colored Prismari command, I think? Just the red portions of those in a little bit of a way, but without like super juiced rate.
Yeah, I agree on the 2 feathers is a really strong direction to tweaking this towards something that's not too juicy. If you were to compare it to rituals, Seething Song, usually those things just boost 2 mana. If you want to compare to treasure tokens, red's got at 4 mana 2 different instant and sorcery respectively that draw 2 cards and create 2 treasure. As like they're not boosting ahead too far, but they're still giving you some other benefit. This is kind of comparable, like boosting you ahead in mana, but also giving you the benefit of being able to damage creatures. So if you were to maybe get it into that 4 mana range or get down to 2 feathers, we're getting closer, or maybe getting closer to something that's exciting. Like I love the feather tokens being like, oh hey, you don't have access to the flexibility of treasures any color of mana, but now you got some damage. That's okay, and that's cool.
Yeah, one way I think you can think about this, like regardless of how you do it, is you're getting like a treasure-based rebate on whatever feathers you don't spend removing stuff.
Yeah, I suppose having the restricted to red mana is probably a good thing to help keep this a little bit more balanced. There's comparisons here with improvised weaponry, which was 2 in a red, and it deal 2 and create 1 treasure token. That was a common, but same, 3 mana. And then also magic missile, which this really seems like a better magic missile, where you could deal 3 damage divided any way you choose. The biggest difference, of course, magic missile couldn't be countered. In most cases, it's just kind of icing on top. But yeah, I mean, obviously, there's some ways to kind of tweak this a little bit.
I do think it captures like Phoenixes very well. I think that making it mono red instead of any color also leans towards like the fieriness of a Phoenix coming from the ashes, just as a vibe. Alrighty. Next up, let's sneak back over to the MSC file and see if I can actually find the card that I'm looking for. Let's talk about Tyrant of the Ashes. This is 3 red for a 5/5 flying dragon. When it attacks, you exile the top 2 cards of your library. When you do, choose one of them. Tyrant of the Ashes deals damage equal to its mana value to target creature, and you may play the other one this turn. So this is like red's impulse draw, but with more selection and the dragon like shooting fire at some creature down below effect, but in order to remove a creature, you have to make your impulse draw a little bit worse, presumably. Obviously, it's nice when, I guess this is a 6-drop, so it's not super likely, but it's nice when there's like a spell you just straight up can't cast this turn, and you get to launder it into just melting a creature. Other than that, I think this is just like a pretty solid way to do this effect.
Yeah, it's cool to see the red's got a lot of the deal damage equal to mana value stuff. I love the fact that you can sweat over whether you want to cast your, say, 6 mana value spell, and then the other card is a land, and you're like, but they do have a good creature, but I mean, this is a good spell though, so you have some interesting choices to make.
Yeah, like the wheel is very much in your hands, and this is like this is a bomb limited card that's going to spiral out of control. But the way in which it does so, like, leaves you playing with your game pieces in a way that's meaningful rather than just, like, taking over the game on its own. And I think that there's, like, a reasonable amount of both control and surprise to it. So you aren't just, like, deterministically dealing a gajillion damage. You could very easily end up in a situation where, like, you have to swing with Tyrant of the Ashes and hope to hit something expensive, and where there's tension still to the game. Where, like, sometimes it's just you have this dragon and it swings in and it burns something, so you know that you're guaranteed safe from this thing of theirs.
Drakaseth and Itali fell in love and had a baby, and this is their baby. It's not quite as powerful as either of them individually. Drakoseth just deals lots of damage on attacks, and Atali takes everybody's top card. But it you sort of get the best of both worlds, and I think this is kind of fun. Like if you're for 6 mana, you're probably not going to be hurting on land. So, but if there's some reason you needed more lands, maybe you got other dragons that we want to pump, or I don't know, more expensive dragons, I guess. You could play the land and deal the damage with the other. Just hopefully you can get some big cards off the top. I think this is a pretty creative design.
One subtle note is that when you pick up your land and choose that to play with this, then you end up having more lands to be able to conceivably double spell in the future. So the more lands you play, the more likely you are to be able to play the other half of it. That's one reason why I kind of wish this was on like a smaller body, but I'm not sure how juiced you can make the rate of it. But I feel like this is like a card that I wouldn't mind seeing at a constructed playable rate for that effect.
Here's a funny situation. Let's say the first time you attack, you flipped over and you got Flame Wave, and you're like, heck yeah, and you wiped out all their Saprolings, and you hit them. And then the next time you attack, you flipped over 2 dragons, a Shivan dragon and some big Bogarden one. It says you have to deal damage to a creature, and this thing is the only creature on the battlefield, so it killed itself.
Oof. Yeah, this does have a little bit of Flame Tongue Kavuitis.
Yeah, unless, if it's not the intent, then you can just put a May in there somewhere.
I assume it's not. It's an interesting drawback if it is, but it's like, it's buried enough in the text that's a little bit gotcha-y.
Oh, wait, you may... oh, no, yeah, you're stuck with playing at least one of them. Gotcha, yep.
Yeah, maybe it should be target creature you don't control or something along the lines of that. Alrighty, Brad, what's your next card?
Okay, let's go to MSE File, and let's open the curtains. Okay, that's the name of the card. This is awesome. That feeling when you got your especially blackout curtains on your room, whether you have it in your actual room or maybe in a hotel room that's got that luxury, or maybe you don't like those. The bright sun is like, yeah, and it definitely is terrible for vampires. But yeah, it really changes the lighting. It might as well be nighttime if you've got the curtains drawn. So it's really cool that you can make it day, and then it relates to destroying vampires. I'm getting vibes from Ixalan, where you have this being able to remove an enchantment or a vampire type of spell. In this case, I love that the other side is very applicable. You're always going to have creatures around in your decks, most cases. And you do get revitalized. That's that vitamin D. It gives you that +1/+1 counter and untap if you're not a vampire.
I also feel like this is pretty serviceable in the night needs to change to day and vice versa deck. There's like a white-red sort of archetype that's like got a lot of things that reward you for night and day changing. It's not really super fleshed out in Midnight Hunt, but I feel like this is the sort of thing that could lend itself towards that. And I also like the idea of, like, you have a ton of night and day switching triggers, it's nighttime, Op swings in with a bunch of big Chungus werewolves, and then you're just like, gotcha, this guy's untapped, it's daytime, this triggers, I'm blocking with this, and your werewolves are rinky-dink, so they probably lose combat as well.
I love the flavor here. It's so clever. Yeah, I mean, it's... Vampires really can't stand daylight, and yeah, they just kind of turn into ash. Maybe that's where the inspiration came from. Everyone else is kind of like, yeah, let's start the day. Come on, let's go. The whole untap it wakes up. I mean, I think that's fantastic. Yeah, I don't think it's too broken. Like, I don't think it's really broken at all. 2 mana to exile a very narrow creature. You do get a very, hopefully it's not incredibly marginal, but still impactful things becoming day. So if your opponents are really heavy, this would probably be a very good sideboard card.
Yeah,
with yeah, with the consolation that, in a counters matter deck and a very serviceable combat trick, especially if your opponent has Nightbound stuff.
Yeah, this strikes me as being like a limited sideboard card where it's like, this hits very strongly like a narrow portion of the deck archetypes in the set. So if I see this like, pack 2 pick like 12 or something and there's nothing else in the pack, I'm not shedding a tear. I'm like, oh sweet, I've got this sideboard card. It's pretty okay. I do kind of enjoy the flavor dissonance of like putting a counter on a werewolf when it becomes daytime. They turn back to being a human, and instead of being tired out from being up all night werewolfing, they're just like, oh hell yeah, I'll have a cup of joe. That sounds great.
Yeah. Have you seen the movie Hocus Pocus, both of you?
I've heard the song Hocus Pocus by Focus, but I've never seen the movie Hocus. Oh wait, is it the one with the witches?
Long ago.
Okay. There's a moment in that where the protagonist is talking to the witches, the antagonists, and who cannot be around the sun. And the protagonist speaks of the power of and makes a statement, and they don't get it, but he goes, daylight savings time, and then they're like, what's that? And then the sun peeks through, and they're like, because they thought they had another hour before the sun would arrive. This is what it feels like. I got that energy there. It's like, aha, the curtains, I have opened them. You're like,
It's funny because it's like, I don't know, there's this role reversal in horror to like when you open the curtains where like all of a sudden they're weak and you're strong. And I feel like there's kind of like, if Innistrad sets are in part supposed to be about like what's the scary thing behind the corner, when you're the monsters and you're like at an advantage, having that like tumble over, and then like the protagonist gets a knife when the serial killer is coming, or they throw open the curtains, or like they like dust off something and it explains how it is that you fight the monster finally, is a cool vibe to have.
Yeah.
All right, that was your card, Brad, or Ancestral? Was that yours?
That was my card.
Okay, so am I next, or is Ancestral? You're next,
I'm next.
Right? I think that's right.
Yeah. Go for it, Ancestral.
All right. So in MSC, there's a card called Ashwood Dryad. This is 2 green-blue. They got the order right. It is a 3/5. When it enters the battlefield, tap target creature. For as long as Ashwood Dryad remains on the battlefield, gain control of that creature, and it becomes a colorless forest land. So I like number 1. This is a clever use of ash. Ash is a tree, right? So there's an ash tree. So it's a little bit different from some of the designs we've seen. But I like that it plays into what Dryads are all about, which they're very nature focused. They're essentially, I don't know, they have a bond with nature, with trees. Some of the earliest Magic cards, we had like the Shanodin Dryads, which were basically like tree-like things. And I like that it really evokes Mind Flayer. And some of those cards, Mind Flayer was a 5 mana 3/3 that you just got to dominate a creature. And here you get to dominate a creature, but it becomes a land. So it is a bit of a drawback. But it does ramp you, which is very green-blue. And so it's very interesting and kind of a spin on the stealing, permanent stealing.
Yeah, and Annex is a blue aura that can have you gain control of a land, and those kind of blue effects always felt kind of weird. It was like it's a semi land destruction sort of thing, but having it being this green-blue thing, that's a really cool twist to that, because green has had like just like a little bit of land destruction, maybe no more. I haven't rechecked the 2021 article on the land destruction, but it's when you combine both of these, then you go, okay, all right, so you get a nice decent body, but now you're in business for making it feel more appropriate for taking away their land development.
I believe that green and black are both tertiary in land destruction right now. I think that's the mechanical color pie for them. I'm trying to remember what green is allowed as far as like transforming creatures go, because obviously there's that thing that turns things into tree folk, and that's not allowed in green. Blue is allowed to turn things into lands, like in Captured by the Moon. But I suppose like the idea of blue stealing a thing and type changing it together on the same card maybe is not something. I don't know. I feel like that, at least in theory, this could all be mono blue, but it's like a very weird thing to have all be mono blue.
I actually just rereading. I misread seeing that it's tap target creature only, and it's not just you can take a land. So I agree. Yes, blue can do altering stuff, but also take stuff. So
I don't know. I think this was a little bit more. I think green fits into this. I mean, obviously you're getting the forest. It is specific to creatures. It's not just any permanents, and just ramping into a land. Like pretend that the creature lost all abilities, and you got to tutor for a land and put it into the battlefield. I guess that's kind of how I equate it to be.
Yeah, so it's weird because, like, while these effects on their own individually could be mono blue, I'm inclined towards the same school of thought as you here, I think. Where, like Griptide is mono blue and milling is mono blue, but if you Griptided something and you milled it, that'd be just, like, cheatily destroying a thing. So that's not really mono blue, even though it theoretically could be. I think that's how I feel about this, where it's like, well, mind controlling a thing is mono blue and type changing a thing is mono blue. But if you type change the thing that you're mind controlling so you get land ramp out of it, then you're like trying to shell game your way towards another color's stuff if you don't make this green blue. Is I think the thought process.
The one thing that's kind of interesting here, and maybe this is nice, but with a lot of archetypes we've seen, especially in recent sets, there's been a fair number of sacrifice outlets where, you can take your opponent's creature and then, hey, I'm going to sacrifice it, end my turn, my zombie gets bigger, or, I get to sacrifice it for some treasure, draw some cards. And in this case, you steal the creature. Well, it's not so easy to sacrifice a land, right? So I sort of kind of like the idea that, you can't really... It's really hard to truly capitalize, like if I guess off of other permanents you might have, or off of other spells. Obviously, getting one more land, getting one more mana each turn is certainly a benefit, but I guess there's always a very realistic chance your opponent could get their creature back.
Yeah, and there's also this thing where, like, usually this sort of mind control effect, less so when it's on a creature, but it has like this 2-for-1-ishness that's really, really pushed on rate, where it's like, I've mind controlled your creature, and if I did it with an enchantment, then I also like have deprived you of a game piece that you will probably have to remove with creature removal. So you're gonna have to spend your own removal spell on your creature, and I'll be up a card. Where on this, not only is the creature that is mind controlling it vulnerable to ordinary creature removal, but you being up a forest is not like a forest is a object represented by a card in Magic, but there are often use cases where being up a forest is not really being up a card.
Yeah, you can't swing with that creature that you stole. Mm-hmm.
Although it'd be interesting if you had some sort of like animation thing where it turned back into a creature, but that's neither here nor there.
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty, I believe I'm next up in the rotation, so let's take a look at in MTG.design. Card is called Fading Spark. It's a colorless planeswalker for 5 mana. It can have no more than 1 loyalty counter on it. It starts with 1 loyalty, so it doesn't just immediately die. And it has -1, you get an emblem with. At the beginning of your draw step, draw an additional card. And -1, you get an emblem with creatures you control get +1/+1. So the idea here is you're getting either like a somewhat below rate, what would that be? JM Daytome, or like whatever the equivalent is now that kids these days are playing, or a somewhat below rate Glorious Anthem, or whatever the kids these days are calling it. What would that be, like Paladin class? And I don't know, I just like the idea of like Planeswalker who's guaranteed gonna kick it. I don't know that I like them being an emblem form after that, because it's not really an interactable game object. But I do like the idea of just like having a Planeswalker who does nothing except like ultimate and get off the table. Like, who's kind of secretly a little bit of sorcery. And I feel like you could fit that realistically into like some sort of Planeswalker tribal set. It'd be interesting if it had like 2 as the maximum, so you could maybe do some proliferate stuff or something. But yeah, I just flavorfully, this felt like a great way to be like, a spark going out is ashes, so that's a cool way to capture that.
Yeah, it's very cool that it's nobody. There's a dash, no dash after the planeswalker here.
Mm-hmm.
Makes me think of all the like Slow Bad from Meriden. Like we never got to see a planeswalker card before Slow Bad sacrificed themselves or their spark. Yeah, so shout out to all those planeswalkers stories that we will never know, and represented by this, whoever this is.
I think this is a planeswalker card that really wants to be a modal card. I like on a spell, like on a sorcery or something. I'm not sure how I feel about the emblem. Like, I get the whole flavor with the spark and everything, but emblems are incredibly powerful, and I know that I think there's a couple of Chandra cards that create some short and small emblems, but I don't know if I just don't know. I guess a couple things. I think this is probably abusable if you have like proliferate. I mean, obviously proliferate is quite strong with any planeswalker, but
so currently it's not because it can't exceed one loyalty.
Oh, I see. Fair enough.
Oh, looks like they looked out for that.
They looked out for that. All right, fair enough. Trying to find the holes when there are none.
Just a little comparison. I know that having white and black mana goes a long way, but Sorin, Lord of Innistrad, -2 when it starts with 3. You get an emblem with creatures you control get +1/+0. It does require colors, but it also is just 1 and 0 instead of 1 and 1. So maybe, I don't know, if this costs 6, it starts getting into being comparable to Sorin.
Yeah, I feel like the rate on Sorin's minus ability was probably designed in the context of being afraid of emblems as a persistent game object, because it's basically like it's the aggressive portion of a Glorious Anthem, but with super indestructible, and then also has marginal upside past that, where you can just start upticking Sorin in order to do other things. Like, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think I would like this a little bit more if there was an incentive to either not activate either ability, or if there was a plus. Thinking back to War of the Spark, we had many planeswalkers that only had minus abilities, but they had a little bit higher loyalty. So you kind of had to make some decisions on when and which abilities to trigger. And I feel like this you have two choices. And I feel like there's not a third choice of, well, just kind of wait a turn. I mean, you could wait a turn, but especially with one loyalty, it's pretty good chance you might lose this spark pretty quickly.
Yeah, I feel like this does fly a little bit in the face of some of the core concepts of planeswalkers as a thing, where they're kind of meant to be game objects that persist on the battlefield. Like, you're supposed to be able to have you and your opponent kind of duke it out in a sub-game around planeswalkers. But this just kind of blows that off.
Yeah, if it were like something that said like +1 and then the effect actually does nothing on it, although maybe you want to put a minor tiny bit of effect like gain 1 life, I don't know. But and then you have a -3 if it started from 1, or what, for example, and then you have a couple turns of your opponent has a mini game now to try to race you to the emblem.
Yeah. All right, Brad, you are next in the rotation.
Okay, let's go over to mtg.design file. Let's look for Ashen Crusader. Okay, so we've got here a knight in red. Very cool. Sometimes we see red get knights. This one has got vibes to me where the coolness looking thing reminds me of Fiend Slayer Paladin, which first appeared in Magic 2014 and was really good at combating against black and red, the enemy colors of white. And both of those colors were really good at are good at removal. One does murder, the other one does direct damage. So Fiend Slayer takes care of that. In this case, this is more of a white likes to gain life, and then blue likes to draw spells. So this one is like, hey, no one can do this anymore for those things. What I think is most clever about the blue hate-ish, or quote-unquote blue hate here, is that red's got a lot of impulse draw, so it gets around its own drawback when it wants to draw cards. There's rummaging, but you can maybe build your deck around to make sure that it does the impulse draw.
I also like that there's a little bit of fringe hate on black and green in this, and that black and green are both like runners up in the life gain awards and runners up in the card draw awards.
Oh, wow. Look at that. Burn it all down.
This guy's just like, frick other colors. All my homies hate other colors.
Yeah, I think I like that it's an elemental knight. I don't know, just Ashen, it's of the elements. I love the classic homage to White Knight and Black Knight, the double pip 2/2 for strike. It's pushed a little bit because that's how we do things with creatures these days. These are very strong. When I say strong, I mean core abilities to red. Right? It's we see that sometimes where hey no life for you, and incidental damage. The draw one or more cards, 2 damage. At first I was like, 2 damage for each card. This is going to get crazy. But I kind of like that it's 1 or more. So that way, red has some of those wheels where you want to discard and draw 3 or whatever. So, yeah, I think this is really well thought out. I'm enjoying this.
One thing I do slightly wish, I feel like this might just be me considering this for like standard or modern or what have you, is that it had some ability to protect itself. As is, it often seems like it would trade with removal. So something like, I don't know, a ward of a number or like a life ward. Or I really wish that ward was templated in a way where you could have stuff that like let the ward creature's controller draw a card, but it's very clunky to phrase that, right?
Oh, yeah. To not have it be confusing, you mean?
Yeah, because it's like your opponent has to pay the cost. So it's like you'd have to have like ward... Ashen Crusader's controller impulse draws.
There you go. Yeah. Because it would still be correct to say your opponent draws or impulse draws, and then they'll be like, "Oh, right, the opponent of the opponent is me." Huh.
Yeah, it's very who's on first.
I kind of like how this is sort of it's a build around. It's such a build around. And I think you could build it around. You could build around, drawing cards or against white blue. You could, like you were saying, you can build it around the black green. It's a sideboard card against not red. And I think that's really cool. I think that it could find home in different kinds of decks. And I think since it works so well against all the other colors, you just throw it in there anyway. Obviously 2/2 is not a strong body. Maybe it's better as a defender, and then there's less risk that you would lose it in combat. But yeah, I'm liking this even more.
Trying to remember what the last thing that I had to say about this was. I had it in my mind and then I lost it entirely. I don't think it's coming back. So I believe then Ancestral, you are next in the rotation.
Sure am. So we can talk about let's talk about Burnout Bright. So this is an MSC. It's 2 in a red. It's an instant. It is a rare. Burnout Bright deals 3 damage to any target, and it has Ashes 1. Create an Ash artifact token with tap. Sacrifice this. Add 1 mana of any color. You may cast this from your graveyard if no mana from lands is spent to cast it. Exile it after. So the Ashes ability is a little wordy here. But I think it's an interesting take on the theme for today. So an Ash counter, I know this is a little similar to Chase the Ember-Bird, where we had the feather token, but or honestly just from a treasure token. The Ashes part, I think, is just that you can recast the spell. So I guess it's sort of like a flashback, if I'm interpreting this correctly. And I think... yeah, you get to cast it for, I guess, 1 less mana. But I think the flavor shines through. So I think that, sometimes with Magic, we have these mechanics that people are like, oh, well, that's just kicker, right? Like, if you're just adding pain mana when it comes onto the battlefield or as you cast a spell, isn't that just kicker? And sure. But, a lot of times it's the execution. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one of those things that's kind of true of like the really archetypical keywords is that people try and collapse everything down into them. I think there was a joke for a while that everything was either kicker or what was the other one? Like
Threshold.
Threshold, yeah. And it's kind of sort of true, but like, saying a split card is a kicker of an entirely different card is kind of being facetious. One thing to note here is for this specifically, it's like only flashback if you can cast it without lands. So assumedly, like in limited, like you would have maybe a mana rock in the format, and then most of your spells would come from, most of your like flashing things back would come from these Ashes tokens, which are just basically just treasure tokens, but like flavored differently. So there's just like, I don't know, it's pretty interesting to have like, I feel like this is pretty pushed at like 3 mana for 3 damage and make a treasure token with the ability to get it back eventually. But I don't necessarily mind that. I wonder what the cards that make more treasure tokens look like. Like, is there going to be a card in this format that's just like, wait, also, does it make treasure tokens on the way back? It probably does, right? So you make a treasure token, like a functionally treasure token with this on the front side, and then you use like a mana rock and 2 treasure tokens to bolt again on the back side, and you get a treasure token in the exchange. That seems really darn solid.
However, we tweak the numbers here to make sure it's not too off rate. I like that I think the flashback is a nice comparison here. Where in this case with Ashes, I feel like you got a punch out card to the smoothie shop. You're like, okay, I've collected 1 Ash, and now if I go and play other Ash cards, I can eventually get enough to play more. And you don't even have to do the A plus B thing where it's like, okay, I have to only use treasure tokens if I got no Ash tokens. I have to try to find those to go and play Burnout Bright. Instead, if you play a bunch of Burnout Brights and other Ashes cards, then they let you at least go and pick and choose which ones you want to spend your hard-earned Ash tokens on, and that's awesome. But you can also go in that direction of like, oh yeah, I love playing a ton of treasure tokens and Ash tokens for a certain type of archetypal deck.
There's also this cool thing that it does with regards to usually flashback has this thing where you're worried about the flashback costs when it comes to milling stuff, and this has this weird thing where because you're like punching your punch card on the front side, you're getting your sources to be able to flash something back on the front half. You end up how do I put this, like having the mill case be less prioritized unless you have other stuff you can be doing. So maybe in a set with Ashes, you would have like a deck that was wanting to do it fairly by like casting them on the front side and like blue-red or something like that. And then like a self-mill deck that I had like Mana Dorks or something that was like blue-green that wanted to do the like unfair mode of casting them just using non-mana sources. Or like as minimally using the actual Ash tokens as possible.
Look at that. Yeah, blue and green both do self-mill. Could do self-mill. That's awesome. I love it.
And it would lend itself towards, that weird blue creature that shows up every once in a while that's like a mana dork for only instant and sorcery spells or whatever?
Yeah, so weird.
And it usually is like kind of blech. It's usually like, oh, this will go like 10th pick in limited because it's just there hanging out. But like with this, you'd be like, oh, hell yeah, that came back to me. Thank goodness. I needed that in order to be able to cast my like back half of all of these spells. It's a little A plus B, but it's A plus B in a way that like it's adding an extra little like layer of obstruction to what is usually like really, really strong for flashback. And the way that they did that in like Midnight Hunt was by having the flashback costs all be like, 10 mana to do like 4 mana worth of stuff. But I like this idea of having it be a mechanical hoop instead of just a pure resource hoop. All right, with that, it's back to me, and I think this is going to be our last card in the rotation. So, pair Thyselves. Let's see. What do I want to do? I think I'm going to do something pretty simple from the MSE file, but just something that I felt was like quite good. Card is... Oh, wait, no, that's from the MTG.design file. It's Forfeit to the Winds. It's a single white for an instant with, if target creature would die this turn, exile it instead, and draw a card. So it's like pre-graveyard hate for a card that does that, like, I don't know if there's like a term people use for it, but like that, like brittle bones, like turn to ash sort of thing that exists that on a lot of red cards that get damage-based forms of this. But I think it's acceptable in white, because white already gets exile. This isn't actually like exiling a creature, so it's not just straight removal, but it is like saying, this is the place that you're going to be going. And white also gets graveyard hate and is kind of the king of the exile zone. So I just like this as like a simple way to have like a probably like quarter mana worth of effect on a card that's then like conveniently cantripped and is something that you might want in like a graveyardy set, or you might want if there's like dies triggers you're afraid of.
Oh yeah, good point about dice triggers. Yeah. But yeah, definitely if there's a bunch of flashback and disturb or, whatever else, or one away from threshold, you're like, no, I'm gonna throw that body out to the wind. You're still not there yet. Yeah, I think this feels very appropriate. Like the process of a creature dying, how do you handle it when it goes to the graveyard? Normally, if you imagine what this narrative says with the card, is that you're burying it, and that's why like black can just take that out of the grave, the body, but instead white is like, hold on, while it's on its way, we'll cremate it, and then that way there's no body anymore, and we draw a card because we feel fulfilled from this process. Very nice.
I'd say maybe it's a little too niche for if this was a common and limited, like this would be very low pick in a pack, but I think as a card itself, it's I like it. I like that it replaces itself, because this is a very very niche effect, and you really want to play this. At least how I would see this here is you'd want to play it along with a kill spell, or maybe in and around combat. It's similar to like the one half of Consecrate Consume, but this seems totally fine. I mean, we've had this effect in white and black, and but yeah, I really just I think if it didn't replace itself, it would just be way less interesting. And I really like the name. I don't know. I think the A+ hit it out of the park. Forfeit to the wins.
Ooh, another bonus. Yeah, I like what you're talking about with how like the different little uses that you could find in limited. If we take the elements of Kaldheim has the white black archetype of casting 2 spells in a turn. This can help you get there. That's a little more fitting than the white black Strixhaven one, which wants to try to cast their spells like before combat is dealt, and this usually would be after combat damage is assigned and dealt or whatever. Actually, wait, you know what? You declare blockers and you can still do it. Okay, cool. But also, yeah, if there was escape, and if you have Kaldheim's second spell thing and then an escape from Theros Beyond Death in the set, this can do like a 2-hit punch or whatever with the very workhorse spell.
I definitely feel like having some sort of like white red or white blue or white black archetype that rewards you for casting spells. Maybe it's prowessy, maybe it's that monk prowess that they had in D&D. Any of those, this starts to become much more favorable of a thing. Although it's weird, because one thing that they've talked about is that like 1-mana cantrips oftentimes have this pressure on them, especially in standard, of just existing to be 1-mana cantrips and to reward you on your other stuff if you have enough spells matters things kind of glommed together. And I think they dislike that, because it starts to be just like if this showed up just to be 1-mana white draw a card, it's kind of a weird thing. You're kind of like rewarding. I don't know what the intuition is, but it's like you're paying off doing this weird thing where you're like playing these cards whose text doesn't matter and only matters to like fill this like kind of linear deck strategy of like, triggering your like Jeskai Ascendancy or whatever.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Brad, it is your final card.
Oh boy.
No
Let's stay
pressure.
here. On a whim here, we'll stay here on mtg.design and choose Whims of Fate. First of all, this card is very similarly named, that's okay, to Whims of the Fates. We can always, if it's a problem, we can change it. There might be examples in existing Magic where there's 2 cards that are very similarly named. But Okay, so and another note too here is that it doesn't say non-enchantment for the effect, and maybe that's something to include, maybe not. We know that Tybalt's Trickery can get rid of enchantment spells, I guess. So whether or not that makes it okay. The cool thing here, I think, is to secretly choose, and you're in that tension of like, what should I choose? It's like Wheel of Misfortune or whatever. You're playing this mind game of like, I gotta make the right choice, and I think this is very fun mini game to play. I like that you can choose up to 2 because now you can make sure that you're not screwed by having to choose if there's only like 2 permanents of note to be able to choose. So it's up to you whether you think your opponent is going to try to make sure that there's 2 on chosen on it or 0 chosen on it. You're trying to get to the right number and then nail it.
Do you think it's a little bendy to have it not specify enchantment? I was tempted to bring this myself just because I was thinking about it in terms of multiplayer games, though, where there's this great like big brain play of you're like, okay, so the person who's most ahead, I guess I need to not choose their stuff because I'm expecting my other opponents to choose their stuff. So what do I want to choose that are like the hipster pick cards to blow up, but that inconvenience me? But then you also have to infer, like, are my opponents also going to do all the hipster picks? Are none of the big bad archenemy players' stuff going to get blown up because me and all my teammates, like de facto teammates in this moment, do we just have fancy play syndrome? Because I definitely have it in this moment because I'm tanking about Whims of Fate, and it's been like a solid minute, and the rest of the table is looking at me. They've got their notepads out, and they've already written down their stuff. Maybe that's just like what I imagine that I would try and like optimize this card like.
I totally misread this card at first. I thought it meant just destroy 2 permanents that were chosen by 1 player. But after you explained it, now I realize I read it wrong, and it's actually just destroy each permanent that was only chosen once. It's kind of interesting, certainly more interesting now that you kind of explained it to me. It's sort of like a prisoner's dilemma where sometimes maybe it's like the reverse of a prisoner's dilemma because you don't want to cooperate with your opponent. So I think maybe this is really cool in multiplayer Magic where if you've got a lot of players, that people are going to have to figure out whether they want to destroy, whether they want to choose the big thing or not. And I don't know if I think it's probably established that you can, table talk, but no, you can't. It secretly chooses. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Shh, it's a secret.
I think if you're honoring the spirit of the card, you shouldn't table talk, but I suppose it's not written in the rules strictly. It's sort of like talking before you go vote, right? If you're playing Mafia, or maybe not Mafia, but if you're deciding who gets kicked off the island, right?
Yeah, maybe this should be a silver border card, and instead of having just a second, it has shut up a second. And it's just like, everybody be quiet, you can't communicate. And you're right about the prisoner's dilemma thing. I think that this is specifically just a form of game that has a coordination problem, is what you'd say. Because like the simple table is just like, if either player A and player B, or neither player pick a thing, that thing is saved. So I think that as you add more players, it becomes a lot more likely that the obvious stuff ends up not getting blown up. But I think you slightly increase the number of things that are blown up on average, but not literally like a 4-player game is going to blow up 8 things, but more like a 4-player game is probably going to blow up like 5 or 6 things. And then like whatever the thing is that everybody thought has to be removed, at least 2 people will probably pick that.
When it comes to secretly choosing table talk, you can compare it with other secret chosen stuff, I guess, that exists, other spells that already do that you can maybe also try to skew it. Let's say you do cast Wheel of Misfortune. Someone just says, hey, I'm just letting everyone know I'm choosing 2. Like, no matter what, I don't care what you pick, I'm choosing 2. And now everyone is like, oh, okay. Well, actually, is this person lying? No, they're probably telling the truth. Okay, now it's good information. I'll choose 3 then. But that's funny that you can actually maybe trick people if you're trying to be truthful and reveal with table talk. Prisoner's Dilemma, awesome call out. I love the I love that game theory.
So I'm gonna say, yeah, I think that like in Magic, the you're free to coordinate, but you're also super free to lie is a fun way to do stuff. You can obviously house rule this, and I think that's one of the things where if we see this as like a commander card specifically, it seems really teed up to just like have your table come to an agreement just about it in general. But I definitely like the sort of thing where I guess you would choose this in app order, so someone could just like write down 2 permanents that they wanted to blow up, and then be like, "Oh, I'm gonna blow up Steve's Mindslaver and Karen's Sword of Fire and Ice. Those are the things I'm blowing up," and they've just written down something entirely different.
Yep.
All right, Ancestral, you are our anchorman here. What would you like to close us out on?
All right, let's go with Demolish, which is 3 and a red for... No, I'm just kidding. Somebody submitted that card, though. And actually, the art's kind of cool. My actual last card is in MSC. It's Disquieting Stillness, which is 3 and 2 white. It's a sorcery, destroy all creatures. Each opponent can't cast spells until their next end step, and you can't cast spells until the end of your next turn. And I think there's a misspelling here. I think it's disquieting with a Q. But I like the idea here. So when people die, there are, you probably burn the bodies or what have you, but there's ash, right? I mean, it's whether it's war or whatever else, like there's ashes there. It's you honor the dead. You drop everything, right? When there's a death, you mourn the loss. You stop what you're doing during the day. So this captures that, and and I think it kind of shows that in the idea of, I guess, in the theater of war, it's both sides. It's not just you. Literally on the battlefield, right? It's both sides are mourning losses. And I don't know. I suppose you could go even further with this, right? Like this is everyone dies. So I kind of like the fact that hey, no one can cast spells for basically a turn.
This is really cool. A little bit of emotion here that can be captured with this, and but it's cool to try to puzzle this out. You're like, okay, I'll have indestructible creatures and et cetera to get around this good thing you're supposed to do, but you're being a sneaky white mage, I guess, and maybe still be able to attack and stuff even after you cast this.
I feel like the upside here, because like usually 5-mana board wipes get a little bit of upside as far as things go. This seems like a pretty darn strong upside, because if you're playing like your classic blue-white like permission and board wipes and removal deck, then oftentimes when you get to the stage where you're going to wipe, you have a turn where your shield's down, where your opponent gets to redevelop immediately. But this, because you operate mostly at instant speed, this makes that shields down moment go away. Your opponent's going to have to redevelop into your counter magic, because you're going to stop the turn where they would redevelop while you're tapped out, and then you will be untapped and again able to cast spells during their next turn. But that comes at the risk of if your opponent has any way to save like one or more of their creatures, then there's like a full turn cycle where they just get to hit in. So if they have a way to if there's a flash creature that phases stuff out or gives it indestructible, then you will end up in a situation where you have spent a board wipe, their stuff is not gone, and even if you have like a second board wipe in hand, even if you have literally the nuts against them, they're still going to get like a full 2 turns of cracking at your face. So it's really pushing your chips all in. I think I would be afraid of this if there wasn't like a good rate on a creature that could save your creatures.
I think this is a more fair Wrath of God style effect. I mean, we have Day of Judgment, we have 5-mana wraths. I'm thinking like every 4-mana wrath now, but I think what it's been well established that it's just too good, right? 4-mana destroy every creature, and now we have single spells that destroy a single creature for 4-mana, and those are considered good and limited. This makes it a little bit more fair because it gives your opponent, I guess, like an extra turn head start. And typically when you have a wrath, you can kind of play around it, right? You can time it just right. You can I think a lot of times if you have the mana, you play the Wrath and then you play your creature. So it's a little bit more fair. Not that board wipes are ever fair, but it's not too one-sided.
Well, no, but like the silencing effect here, yeah, your opponent gets to redevelop first, but you have all your mana back at that point. So it's like, how the like blue-white deck that's controlling wants to get to like turn a gajillion with a crazy number of cards in hand, and then just like reach a point where they can like counter or invalidate everything of yours. Like a hand that has Disquieting Stillness and a counterspell is probably actually a little bit better than a hand that has like a 4-mana Wrath and the same counterspell, because your opponent can like redevelop after the 4-mana Wrath, where after the Disquieting Stillness you can counter whatever their like best piece of redevelopment is.
Yeah, normally you'd have to have, let's say it is standard. You pay for another Wrath, I guess you pay 5 mana, and then you have 2 or 3 mana up, depending on if you have Cancel or Negate or Essence Scatter in your hand. You'd have to have that much mana. So if you want to be like, Wrath, go, and then they go, all right, I'll now play my big bomb, and you're like, okay, cancel. You would require 6 or 7 mana to be able to do that. I guess this shortcuts 1 more mana for you to have like 5 full mana, right? When they start developing to counter stuff. That is, I wonder how often. That probably is a common archetype, isn't it, for control?
Yeah, it's one that they also try and fight against a little bit. Like it shows up from time to time, but usually when it shows up and it's really dominant, I think it's seen by development as a little bit of a failure state. Last time it was really good was like Teferi, the 5-mana Teferi. And then before then, probably as far back as like one of the silly control decks in Cons or something like that at some point, probably.
I do like this. Does go. That's a good point about when you pointed out Teferi. It's like, hey, this gives you an extra turn to do your Planeswalker upticks if you want.
Yeah,
as well.
Or if you had animated, things that turn into creatures that are artifacts or lands or what have you. I guess if you had creature generators. But yeah, I mean, Mark's probably right. This is a clearly a card that benefits control decks a lot more. However, I don't know. I think in the right environment, it could be built maybe in such a way that it's not too crazy, at least in limited, but
yeah, I agree.
I don't know. Maybe there could be something fun you could do with Flash, like a big Flash creature that you could kind of sneak in on your opponent's turn. But
like good Flash guys, or like a good 3-mana Planeswalker that aggressive decks want to play. Either of those would probably help make this like much safer, because like the blowout case would be something that you could play around in deck construction. You'd be like, I'm going to play the green deck that has this 3-mana Planeswalker that makes some little guys, because I know that I will get more little guys turns because they're going to wipe my board.
This would be kind of fun in a deck that had, I don't know how that would work. If you had morph creatures, for example, or maybe manifest. Having the face down, being able to do with. Oh well, I guess you couldn't cast spells, so I guess that wouldn't work either. I guess I retract that.
Alrighty. Well, that should about wrap things up. The outro here. That's our show. Big thanks to Bradley Rose and Ancestral for joining me today. Thank you to Kaio for putting the show together. Cajun for setting up the bot submission on Discord. And a second thanks to Ancestral for setting up card submission on mtg.design. If you'd like to know more about Moxtober or custom card design in general, check out #MTGMoxtober on Twitter, r/custom magic on Reddit, mtg.design, or the Beacon of Creation or Custom Magic Discords. Hopefully we'll see you there, and either way, have a great day. Thank you so much.